January 14, 1995, 3:42 a.m., Bally's Park Place, Atlantic City. The air is thick with stale tobacco and the quiet desperation of grinders playing their final dollars. Suddenly, the Keno Lounge freezes. A machine flashes a $100,000 jackpot, a payout that shouldn't be possible. Security stares at the winner, Reed McNeil. The odds of hitting his specific 8-number set are 1 in 230,000, 115. You are statistically more likely to be struck by lightning while being mauled by a shark. But McNeil isn't cheering. He's stone-faced, demanding cash so he can vanish. The security boss looks at his team and whispers, "Something is broken." This is the story of Ron Harris, a state technician who turned the computer code he was paid to protect into a personal vault. For 2 years, Harris was the ghost in the machine, outsmarting multi-billion-dollar empires using a master key and a hidden exploit. He didn't just find a flaw, he engineered one. The most staggering part? The house didn't catch him through advanced surveillance or digital firewalls. He's in a questioning room today for one reason only. He got greedy enough to try the same impossible trick twice in 1 week. In 1993, Ron Harris was less of a man and more of a ghost haunting the edges of the Nevada state system. He didn't live, he existed. His world was confined to a small, suffocating apartment on the fringes of Las Vegas, a place where the air conditioning unit rattled like a dying engine and the carpet permanently smelled of stale tobacco and old, recycled desert air. It was the kind of place where dreams went to die, replaced by the harsh reality of survival. His mailbox was a physical manifestation of his anxiety, stuffed to the brim with final notice warnings, red ink letters from aggressive debt collectors, and threats of utility shutoffs. His financial reality was a suffocating noose. His bank account sat frozen at exactly $127, not enough to flee, not enough to live. He was drowning in $42,000 of student loan debt, a crushing weight for a man in the early 90s, and his rent was 3 months late. Every time the phone rang, his stomach dropped. Every knock at the door made him freeze in his kitchen, waiting for the eviction notice or the repo man. He was a genius living in squalor, a man with a mind capable of solving the most complex puzzles, yet he couldn't solve the puzzle of his own poverty. During the day, Ron lived a double life. He worked as a computer technician and programmer for the Nevada Gaming Control Board. On paper, it sounded prestigious. In reality, his pay was a meager $32,000 a year. It was a cruel joke. Every single morning, he climbed into a beat-up, rusting car with a noisy engine that screamed for mercy. And he drove past the most opulent display of wealth on the planet. He drove past the Mirage with its fake erupting volcano that cost more than his entire lifetime earnings. He drove past the MGM Grand, bathed in emerald lights, and Caesar's Palace with its imported marble statues and fountains. He watched the limousines glide by. He watched the tourists pouring out of cabs with wads of cash, ready to lose it all in seconds. He knew the math. He knew that in just 1 hour of operation, on a slow Tuesday morning, those buildings made more money in pure profit than he would see in a dozen lifetimes of honest hard work. The disparity was sickening. He was the janitor of the gold mine, sweeping up the dust while everyone else walked away with nuggets. Ron was one of only 12 people in the entire state of Nevada, a state built entirely on gambling revenue, who possessed master access to the source code of the slot machines. His job title was technician, but his role was the anti-cheat. He was the police officer of the digital world, the guardian of the game. His responsibility was to test every single new machine that rolled off the factory line before it was allowed to take a single quarter from a tourist. He combed through every line of code written by the industry giants like IGT, Bally's, and Aristocrat. He was the firewall. If a billion-dollar company wanted to put a new poker machine on a casino floor, Ron Harris had to look at its brain and certify that it was fair. He had to sign off that the machine wasn't rigged, that it paid out correctly, and that it couldn't be hacked. The irony was palpable. He knew the inner logic of these machines better than the engineers who built them. He spent 8 hours a day in a sterile, white-walled lab, staring at silicon microchips through a magnifying glass, hunting for bugs and glitches. He was the smartest man in the room, protecting a system that didn't care if he starved. The light bulb moment didn't happen with a bang. It happened in the quiet, sterile silence of the lab in December 1993. Ron was running a routine diagnostic on a new model of video poker machine. He was analyzing the random number generator, RNG, the digital heart of the device, To the average gambler, the RNG is a mystical god of luck. They think the machine has moods, that it runs on fate or hot streaks. Ron knew better. He saw the cold, hard skeleton of mathematics underneath the flashing lights. He realized something that day that changed everything. The RNG wasn't truly random. True randomness is impossible for a computer to generate on its own. It followed a set plan. It was just a very fast, very complex math problem that repeated itself over and over again in a loop. If you looked at it long enough, patterns emerged. If you knew the formula, the luck evaporated instantly. It ceased to be gambling and became a simple equation. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He whispered to himself, "If I know the rule, and I know where the math starts, I can see the future. I can know which card is coming next before the machine even decides to show it. And if I can see the future, I can own the casino." Ron stared at the blinking green text on his CRT monitor for 47 minutes straight. He didn't blink. He didn't move. The hum of the computer fans sounded like a choir. In that trance, he thought about his empty fridge, which currently held nothing but a half-gallon of expired milk that smelled sour and a jar of pickles he had been rationing for 3 days. He thought about the bill collectors who called his house 3 times a day, waking him up, harassing him, treating him like a criminal for being poor. He realized the state of Nevada was paying him $32,000 a year to protect an $8 billion business that viewed players as nothing more than sheep to be sheared. "Who's really stealing from who?" he whispered to the empty lab. The sound of his own voice broke the spell. He opened his text editing tool. He didn't just start typing code, he started building a weapon. He began to construct a secret backdoor into the software, a digital key that only he possessed. He was no longer the anti-cheat. He was the wolf, and he was designing the perfect way to enter the henhouse. To truly understand the brilliance of what Ron Harris did, you have to understand how a slot machine actually thinks. It is crucial to realize that the machine does not have a soul, it doesn't have a conscience, it doesn't know if you are having a bad day, and it certainly doesn't care if you win or lose. It is a cold, unfeeling calculator that follows a clock. The random number generator, RNG, is the engine of the casino. It works like this. It is a mathematical loop that runs thousands and thousands of times every single second, 24 hours a day, even when no one is sitting in the chair. It cycles through millions of potential outcomes at lightning speed. It uses a start value, usually a number taken from the internal clock of the machine or the thermal noise of the motherboard, and dumps it into a critically hard math problem to spit out a result. Most people harbor a fantasy about how these machines work. They think the moment you pull the handle or press the button is the moment the reels spin and the machine decides if you win. That is a lie. That is theater designed to keep you entertained. The machine decided if you won or lost the exact split second you initiated the bet. The spinning reels, the sounds, the anticipation, that is all just an animation playing out a result that was determined milliseconds ago based on where the math loop was at that exact moment. Ron noticed a flaw that everyone else in the industry had missed. The luck is fake. It is a simulation of luck. If you have the source code, you have the map to the simulation. But even with the map, there is a problem. You can't guess the start number. Because the internal clock moves every millisecond, the start value changes too fast for a human brain to track. It moves faster than the blink of an eye. You cannot time it. It is physically impossible. Unless, of course, you are the one who writes the rules of the game. Unless you can force the machine to stop thinking and start listening to you. Ron didn't try to hack the machines from the outside like a character in a bad spy movie. He didn't sit on the casino floor with a laptop and a cable running into the machine. That would trigger an immediate alarm and security would tackle him in seconds. He was smarter than that. He used his master access to attack the machine before it even left the laboratory. He decided to put a hidden piece of code, a secret door, directly into the EEPROM chips. These EEPROM chips are the literal brains of the machine. Imagine this. A standard EEPROM chip is a small black rectangle with silver legs, about the size of a postage stamp. It looks boring, but inside, it holds tens of thousands of lines of computer instructions. It tells the machine how to shuffle cards, how to pay out, and how to flash the lights. Ron took the blank chips in the lab and inserted just 20 lines of extra code. It was microscopic. To a normal engineer looking at the code later, it would look like a standard memory check or a temperature gauge to make sure the machine wasn't overheating. It hid in plain sight, but it was actually a sleeper agent, a digital spy waiting for a specific signal to wake up. The secret door worked on a trigger mechanism, The genius was in the concealment. The machine would work 100% legally for 99.9% of the time. The Gaming Commission could test it for weeks and find nothing wrong. It played fair. But if a player entered a very specific, very bizarre cheat code sequence of buttons, the sleeper agent would wake up and take control of the brain. The Harris sequence was designed to be something nobody would ever do by accident. It had to be precise. It was a ritual. First, the player had to insert exactly $5 in quarters. Not $4, not $6, exactly $5. This primed the memory buffer. Then they had to press the deal button exactly once. When the cards appeared on the screen, the player had to hold cards 2, 3, and 5. It didn't matter what the cards were. They could be junk cards. You had to hold the physical positions of 2, 3, and 5. This was the signal. Then press the draw button. Immediately after the draw, put in another $5 in quarters. Finally, press the deal button 2 times, very fast. Once that specific order was followed, the math loop would stop being random. The random number generator would crash and reset. It would jump back to a known start 0. It was like resetting a stopwatch. Ron knew exactly what the next 10 results would be from start 0, because he had calculated the list at home on his own computer. The randomness was gone. The next hand wasn't a gamble, it was a scripted event. He knew that if he bet max coins on the next hand, the machine would deal a royal flush. It was a mathematical certainty. But the cost to make this tool? $0. He used the state's computers, the state's electricity, and the state's chips. The time to build it? 3 hours in a state lab on a Tuesday, while his boss was out eating a long lunch. The success rate? 100%. He had turned the slot machine into an ATM that only he had the PIN for. In March 1994, Ron knew he couldn't play the machines himself. He was a state employee, his face was known, and he couldn't legally gamble. He needed a ghost. He found a partner named Reed Errol McNeil. Reed was the perfect partner because he was invisible. He was quiet, he wore boring, off-the-rack clothes, and he didn't look like a pro gambler or a hustler. He looked like a tourist who had lost his way. Most importantly, Reed was broke. He really needed the money. Their first test wasn't at the Mirage or Caesars. They went to a small, dusty casino away from the main strip called the Crystal Bay. It was a locals joint, filled with cigarette smoke and the sound of despair. Reed sat down at a specific video poker machine that Ron had serviced weeks prior. He felt the sweat making his hands slippery on the plastic buttons. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He looked around for cameras, for security, for anyone watching. He began the sequence. Clink, clink, clink. $5 in. Press deal. Hold the second, third, and fifth card. Draw. Clink, clink. Another $5. Double tap deal. The machine didn't make a sound. It didn't flash an error message. It simply waited. Reed looked back at Ron, who was standing by the bar, sipping a drink, watching from a distance. Ron gave a barely perceptible nod. The code had executed. The machine was now in God mode. Reed bet the maximum amount. He hit the button. The cards snapped onto the screen. Ace of hearts, King of hearts, Queen of hearts, Jack of hearts, 10 of hearts. A royal flush. The odds of hitting this naturally were 1 in 40,000. Reed had hit it on command. The machine began to scream. Sirens wailed, bells rang, and the light on top of the cabinet began to strobe violently. Jackpot. The screen flashed. $4,000. Reed froze. He was terrified, but the attendant just walked over, smiled, verified the win, and counted out $400 bills into his shaking hand. It worked. It actually worked. They didn't stop there. They drove to a different casino 2 hours later. They repeated the ritual, the sequence, the sweat, the button press. $8,000 win. By the end of March, they had hit 6 different machines across the city. They had won $32,000 in cold hard cash. Think about that number, $32,000. That was exactly what Ron made in an entire year of working for the state. They had made a year's salary in just 1 weekend. And the most brilliant part, because Ron was the anti-cheat, he was the specific officer assigned to investigate suspicious wins for the state. When the reports of these jackpots crossed his desk on Monday morning, he simply deleted them. He erased the paper trail. He was the bank robber and the chief of police at the same time. He was untouchable. Axity 4. The heat. Execution and near misses. The summer of 1994 in Nevada wasn't just hot, it was a furnace. But for Ron Harris and Reed McNeil, the heat didn't come from the desert sun. It came from the friction of moving hundreds of thousands of dollars of probability into their own pockets. They had ceased to be men and had become the house itself. They didn't just play the game, they were the game. They moved through the neon-soaked geography of Las Vegas like ghosts, invisible entities in a city designed to track everything. June 12, 1994, 11:14 p.m., Fremont Casino. The Fremont was old Vegas. It smelled of desperation, cheap perfume, and ozone. Reed McNeil walked onto the carpeted floor, his palms damp. He wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a vessel for Ron's genius. He approached a high-paying video slot machine, a towering monolith of flashing lights and promise. He checked his watch. He had exactly an 8-minute window before the floor shift change, the blind spot in the security rotation that Ron had calculated weeks ago. 11:15 p.m. Reed began the ritual. It was a performance of mundane precision. He inserted the coins with a rhythmic clack, clack, clack. His heart was a trapped bird, beating against his ribs, threatening to burst. A cocktail waitress in a short skirt drifted by, a tray of watered-down gin in her hand. "Drink, honey?" Reed didn't look up. He couldn't break the count. "No," he whispered, his voice cracking slightly. The waitress shrugged and moved on. The thread held. 11:17 p.m. The sequence was complete. The Harris sequence had been inputted. The code inside the EEPROM chip woke up. The machine was no longer a random number generator. It was a vending machine waiting to dispense. Reed pulled the handle. It felt heavy, mechanical. 11:18 p.m. The reels didn't just spin, they marched. 7, 7. The machine erupted. It was a primal scream of digital noise. Bells, whistles, sirens. The screen locked. $40,000 jackpot. Reed didn't smile. He felt a wave of nausea. Winning wasn't the hard part. Surviving the win was. Near miss won. The technical check. The floor erupted in commotion. Tourists gathered, their eyes wide with envy. But the only person Reed saw was the slot technician pushing through the crowd with a ring of keys on his belt. This was the moment of maximum danger. "That's a hell of a hit, buddy," the tech said, his voice flat, bored. "Standard procedure. I gotta open the door and check the EEPROM. Verify the chip signature." Ron Harris was standing 20 feet away, pretending to read a Keno board. His blood turned to ice. If the technician looked too closely at the chip, if he noticed the soldering was slightly off, or if he ran a deep diagnostic, he would see the 20 lines of parasitic code. He would see Ron's handwriting in the silicon. The tech unlocked the machine. The heavy door swung open, revealing the guts of the beast. He pulled out the logic board. He held the brain of the machine in his hands. Ron stopped breathing. He calculated the odds of discovery, 50-50. The tech squinted at the board for 10 agonizing seconds. He rubbed a smudge off the plastic casing with his thumb. "Looks good," the tech grunted, sliding the board back into the slot. "Clean win. Congrats." He locked the door. The bullet had grazed them. Later that night, in the dark corner of a sterile parking lot, Reed handed Ron a gym bag. They split the cash under the flickering yellow light of a street lamp, $20,000 each. It didn't feel like money, it felt like evidence. August 19th, 1994, the pattern problem. Success is a dangerous drug. Reed hit 4 major jackpots in 3 weeks. It was too much, too fast. In the world of probability, luck has a texture, and this texture was too smooth. It defied the jagged edges of reality. A report was generated by a floor boss at the Barbary Coast. Subject, statistically anomalous activity. Player Reed Errol. Status, urgent review required. The report traveled through the pneumatic tubes of the bureaucracy and landed on a desk at the Nevada Gaming Control Board. The desk belonged to Ron Harris. Ron picked up the file. He read his own crime in black and white. His hand shook so violently that hot coffee splashed onto his wrist. He didn't feel the burn. He was staring into the abyss. If he ignored the report, his superior might audit the file later and ask why he missed it. If he investigated it, he would have to arrest his partner. Ron chose the third path. He opened his word processor and wrote a lie. He drafted a dense 10-page technical verification. He used jargon as a shield. He claimed the machine had suffered a mechanical coin comparator jam that caused the sensor to misread a small payout as a jackpot. He flooded the explanation with so much technical gibberish that no manager would dare question it for fear of looking stupid. He stamped the file, cleared mechanical error. He shredded the original report. He was erasing his own footprints in the snow while the blizzard was still raging. September 1994, the paranoia was eating Ron alive. He was at a casino in Reno, performing a routine maintenance check. He had the logic board of a machine open, and he was physically swapping the EEPROM chip for a rigged one. "What are you doing there, Ron?" The voice came from behind. A large security guard, hand resting on his belt. Ron froze. The rigged chip was in his hand, halfway into the slot. He turned slowly. His face was a mask of calm, but his shirt was soaking wet against his spine. "The board sent a special memo this morning," Ron lied smoothly. "They think the RNG on this series is drifting. Statistical variance is out of tolerance. I'm just running a checksum verification." The guard blinked. He didn't know what statistical variance meant. He just knew Ron was the computer guy. "Oh, okay. Just didn't see it on the log." "Emergency update," Ron said, pushing the chip into place with a click. "You know how the state gets about their tax revenue." The guard laughed. "Yeah, carry on." As the guard turned the corner, Ron exhales a breath he had been holding for a lifetime. He realized then that he couldn't keep doing this. The stress was going to eliminate him before the police did. January 14th, 1995. The greed. Boredom is the enemy of the genius. Video poker was safe, but the payouts were capped at $4,000 or $8,000. Ron wanted the score that would allow him to disappear forever. He wanted fuck you money. He spent 3 sleepless nights rewriting the logic for a Keno machine. Keno was different. It wasn't about cards, it was about pure numbers. The odds of hitting an 8 spot, guessing 8 numbers correctly out of 8, were 1 in 230,115. The payout was astronomical. Ron felt untouchable. He had become arrogant. He believed he had solved the universe. 2:47 a.m. Reed McNeil walked into Bally's Park Place in Atlantic City, New Jersey. This was the mistake. They had left their home turf. In Nevada, Ron was the law. In New Jersey, they were nobody. Reed was nervous. The air here was colder, the lights harsher. The guards didn't know him, and he didn't know the shift changes. 3:01 a.m. Reed bought the Keno tickets. He didn't pick birthdays or lucky numbers. He picked the sequence Ron had calculated. 1, 8, 11, 12, 15, 19, 20, 33, 30:42 a.m. The draw began. The balls popped up on the screen. 1, 8, 11. Reed held his breath. 12, 15, 19. The pattern was emerging. It was perfect. 20, 33, 35, 46. All 8 numbers. A statistical impossibility. The machine locked up. $100,000 win. The room went instantly, terrifyingly quiet. A win like this doesn't happen. It's a 100-year event. The pit boss didn't smile. He didn't offer a drink. He walked straight to Reed, flanked by 2 suits. "Where are you staying, Mr. McNeil?" the boss asked. His eyes were like flint. Reed stumbled. He hadn't prepared a cover story for New Jersey. "Nowhere. I'm just passing through." The boss raised an eyebrow. "With $100 grand? Reed felt the walls closing in. "We'll need to verify the machine's software before we cut the check," the boss said. "It's state law. It'll take a few days." Reed didn't fight. He couldn't. If he argued, they would call the cops. He turned and walked out into the freezing Atlantic City morning, leaving the ticket behind. He knew, deep down, that the game was over. The collapse of Ron Harris's empire didn't happen with a shootout or a high-speed chase. It happened in the quiet, dusty silence of a code review room, with a single line of text that Ron thought he had buried deep enough to hide from God. Part 1. The Discovery. January 15, 1995. Dennis Nylander was one of the sharpest minds at the Nevada Gaming Control Board. Ron's peer, and unknowingly, his hunter. He received a frantic call from the New Jersey Gaming Commission regarding the impossible Keno win at Bally's. They suspected foul play, but they couldn't find the gun. "Send me the EEPROM," Nylander ordered. When the chip arrived, Nylander didn't just scan it, he dissected it. He spent 14 hours staring at hexadecimal code, a sea of numbers and letters. He was looking for a needle in a stack of needles. He found it at a subroutine labeled LCHK. To an amateur, it looked like a standard lighting check command. But Nylander saw the anomaly. The command didn't link to the lights, it linked to the random number generator. It was a bridge that shouldn't exist. Nylander traced the command back to the source log. Every change in the state's software required a digital signature, a stamp of approval from the testing officer. There, at the bottom of the code that stole $100,000, was the digital signature, Ronald Dale Harris. Nylander sat back in his chair. He wasn't angry, he was stunned. The arsonist was the fire chief. January 15, 1995, 6:47 a.m. The raid wasn't glamorous. The FBI didn't rappel down the sides of a luxury penthouse. They entered the hotel room of a cramped, smelly room in a low-rent district of Atlantic City. Ron Harris was asleep on a mattress that sat on the floor. When he woke up to the sight of assault rifles and windbreakers, he didn't fight. He looked resigned. He looked tired. The agents tore the apartment apart, expecting to find a lavish lifestyle. Rolexes, sports cars, designer suits. Instead, they found squalor. They pried open a loose panel behind the kitchen stove. Inside the wall, wrapped in aluminum foil and trash bags, was $127,000 in cash. It was a fortune, rotting in the dark. On his coffee table, amidst old pizza boxes, lay the master key, a set of EEPROM burners and notebooks filled with the source code for every major slot machine manufacturer in the world. IGT, Bally, Williams. He had the keys to the kingdom, but he was living like a peasant. The trial was swift. The evidence was irrefutable. Ron Harris, the man entrusted to protect the integrity of the game, was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. He served 2, but the prison sentence was the lesser punishment. The real sentence was the exile. Ron Harris became the only person in history to be placed in the Black Book, the excluded person list, specifically for crimes involving computer source code. This is a life sentence. He is banned from every casino on Earth. If he steps foot onto the carpet of a gaming floor, he is immediately arrested for trespassing. He cannot walk into a 7-Eleven in Las Vegas if it has a slot machine in the corner. He is a man allergic to the economy of his own city. The shockwave of his crime reshaped the entire industry. The gambling world realized that their black box machines were vulnerable. The manufacturers, IGT, Bally, Aristocrat, had to spend an estimated $400 million recalling chips, rewriting code, and creating new security protocols. A new law was passed, informally known as the Harris Rule. No single engineer is ever allowed to have master access to the source code alone. It now requires 2 separate keys, held by 2 separate people, to access the RNG, much like the launch sequence of a nuclear weapon. Ron Harris had single-handedly ended the era of trust. Today, Ron Harris lives a quiet life in Las Vegas. The ghost has become a shadow. He works as a freelance web developer, writing simple code for small businesses. He makes an honest living, scraping by, far removed from the neon glow. But there is a tragedy in his brilliance. Ron Harris was a genius. If he had gone to his bosses in 1993 and said, "I found a flaw in the RNG and here is how we fix it," he would have been hailed as a hero. He could have left the state job and become a high-paid security consultant. He could have made $30 million legitimately, teaching casinos how to lock their doors. He had the talent to be the Bill Gates of gambling security. Instead, he chose the secret door. He chose the quick $32,000 over the legacy. Was Ron Harris a villain? To the casinos, he was a monster. He struck at the very heart of their business model, the illusion of fairness. But to some, he is a dark kind of folk hero. He was a man who looked at a system designed to strip poor people of their money, a system rigged by math to ensure the house always wins, and he decided to rig it back. He didn't use a gun. He didn't use violence. He used logic. He used 20 lines of elegant code to prove that the luck the casinos sell is nothing more than a computer program, and programs can be rewritten. He spent 2 years in a concrete cell for stealing a few $100,000. The casinos spent $400 million to stop him from ever doing it again. Ron Harris didn't just hack the machines, he hacked the myth. He pulled back the curtain and showed the world that the wizard was just a man with a keyboard, and that is a debt the gambling industry will never be able to collect.